morning, good morning, good morning. Hey, first of all, I want to thank all of you for coming. I know it was an investment in time and resources, so thank you very much. Hey, I had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people last night and this morning, and it's just amazing how many of you have been here for almost all of the summits. It's amazing, and it's humbling when I talk to you and you say, hey, Sandler's changed my life, or have given me the stories between where you started with us and where you are now, whatever that is for your journey. It's amazing. And I think the thing that hits me the most every single time is when I talk to people and they say, I've been a client for 10, 15. I met somebody who was 24 years. It's just amazing. You know, it's a testament to your investment in your performance. And it's unusual. So this is an unusual group, if you think about it, a group of learners like us. And for that journey, I'd like to do a shout out, because that journey we didn't make on our own. We actually had our Sandler performance trainers and consultants with us. So if we can, let's give them all a round, because we're all here because they invited us here. Yeah, they're awesome. I was actually in the audience, as you were, when I first started my career. And I went to a 2-day boot camp, and I was a sentee. Do you know what a sentee is? They didn't want to be there, so they were sent by their employer. You know, I was a hostage, and it was a 2-day boot camp, and I spent the first hour of the day coming up with my story to give my employer that I was there day 2 because I was going fishing. You know, one of those things. But I fell in love with it, and so it's amazing. Hey, listen, we have 50,000 people come through our program every single year. 50,000 people. And so many different geos, different sized businesses, different industries, right? Whether it's transactional sales, you've got consultative sales, enterprise sales, it's all over the place. And we see so many best practices. Sometimes we see some things that aren't so best practices as well, but we see patterns. And so what I'd like to do this morning is to set the stage, because you've got 2 days of wonderful presenters, is to talk about what I'm going to say is imperatives. And those are some trends that we see. Now, I'm only, because we have 45 minutes together, I'm going to cover some in a macro perspective, but there's a lot to these things, and we'll send some stuff out after the fact that'll kind of give you some more in-depth. But I want to share those with you, and we're going to dig deep into these. So there's 3 of them that we're going to talk about today. First, the complexity of the buyer journey and the sales landscape is going to require a new breed of salespeople. Now, that doesn't mean that we're in trouble. It just means that we're going to have to do things differently, right? If we just talk about the buyer journey for a second, buyers have like endless access to data, more than they've ever had in their lives. We do too as salespeople, but it's just kind of changed the way that we interact with our buyers. You have to assume when you're talking to a net new buyer that they've already researched your company, they've researched your product, and they've researched your competitors. Right? They know more about you than they ever have in the past. Now, they don't know the nuances between your product and somebody else's. That's your magic, that you're going to connect those dots. But it's there. We have to understand where people are in that buyer journey, because we have to connect the right message at the right time and the right sales motion to what we do. And on the sales side of that buyer journey, right, because it's changing, it's just, if you think about technology and what it's done in the 3 areas that we probably all pay attention to, you know, you've got pre-funnel stuff, you've got funnel, you've got, I'll call it post-funnel or expansion stuff. It's just amazing. If I take one simple example that we're all using, you know, like ChatGPT. We all use ChatGPT at this point in time. But think about the research that we can do as salespeople. And think about the ability for us to pinpoint pain by industry, by company, by persona. It's amazing. I mean, it really has accelerated that process, because it would take us a number of times for questions and to get, okay, really, what are the pain points? You can show up now and just kind of throw these pain indicators on the table, and the buyer says, wow, these people really understand our business. And we would have gotten there eventually anyways, but technology has really just condensed that for us if we're using it properly. And so the second one is, hey, we're going to talk about technology and sales have to work in conjunction with each other more so than ever in order, my opinion, for the survival of your sales organization, right? Hey, listen, there's a lot of tech out there. There's a lot of tech. And one of the bigger questions we always get is, hey, Dave, what tech do we need? And how am I going to make sense of all that? But I think there's so much overlap of technology that we have in our companies. If you think about SaaS for a second, they never want you to leave that platform. So there's a lot of overlap. And so we have to figure out, okay, what tech are we going to actually get behind? And then we have to do some other things. We have to make sure that tech by itself isn't really going to get us there. So we have to make sure that we've embedded methodology, which I'll talk about in a second, because tech for the tech's sake is not going to get it done. We've got to make sure that it's in the flow of work, which means make it easy for us to access. Don't make us go from platform to platform to platform, right? How do we just stay where we are? And then technology, if you really think about it, almost for the first time, has really helped us make data-driven decisions. If you watch that movie Moneyball, technology has changed baseball. Technology has changed the way we sell as well. It's the same thing if we decide to use it. I'm always amazed on how many people actually aren't leveraging the technology, but it's there. And the last one is organizations that really dig deep for sales leadership and have strong leadership and are developing sales leadership will have a competitive edge moving forward. Because of all the changes that are going on, we need strong leadership. I think that's the hardest job in any organization, to be honest, as a sales leader, right? It's tough. We have more teams now since COVID, so there's a lot of things going on. So what are the things that are changing all of these things that we're talking about? So I see some patterns out there. One, cost of money. The cost of money has changed and is really the ripple effect of a lot of different things because things are more expensive, certainly on our consumer side, you know that. But think about from an organizational perspective. Now things cost a lot more money. Well, now we're making conservative decisions. So I'm just not going to throw some money over there to see how it works. The other thing that's happening, I'm fighting some allergies, I'm sorry. The other thing that's happening is that we have to make more universal or enterprise decisions. If you think about that, if the cost of money, now I'm going to say, hey, listen, your group, if we think about this as a company, right, the left-hand side, they can make their own decision about what they're doing. You can make your own decision about what you're doing. You can make your decision. That's no longer true. Organizations are saying, well, how do we leverage our investment? We want to have one of anything, whatever we're buying, if we could do it. Now, once that happens, what's the ripple effect of that? Well, that means now that instead of me just talking to this group, now I've got to sell to all of the other groups in the organization that now have to live with whatever decision's been made. And that's changed. So now I've got these enterprise-wide decisions. So that's there. So from a sales perspective, if you think about it, our number one competitor was always indecision. Well, that's certainly true. But now that I've got more people involved, I've got to really make sure as a salesperson that I really do understand the pain points of all of those and the impact of those pain. So that's there. Now, if I think about that, think about remote for a minute, how that's changed everything. It's changed the way you sell, but it's also made it easier for more people to be involved in that buying process. Because if I was on a committee, we've all been on committees, and I had to fly to home office because there was going to be some presentation. It took me a day to get there. I spent 1 or 2 days, watching the dog and pony shows, and then I had to fly back. That's 4 days out of my life. There's only so many committees I could be on. And so ultimately what happens is you'll hear decision makers say, I can't make this, but Mary and I are aligned. Her vote is my vote. Or people don't show up. And as a seller, when somebody doesn't show up, they do show up eventually, and they tend to show up at the very end, and then we have to start over. It messes up our deal. So, remote has made it super simple for a lot of buyers to get involved. But it's also, I think remote has done a couple things for us as an organization too. First of all, it's really tough to onboard people remotely. It's hard, right? We can all make that shift, but it's hard. It's hard. I think it's hard to create sales culture remotely. There's a lot of stuff going on, I think. So outside of that, you've got tech, right? We talked about technology a little bit. Tons of technology changes. We still have supply chain issues going on, so we're dodging and weaving that problem. Still, talent is always an issue. So there's a lot of things going on that has created this change in the buyer journey, but also in that sales landscape. And so what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about each of those imperatives, but dig deep in each one of them and give you some things to think about. And as I talk, I'd like you to think about what have you done to address some of these things? What have you done to change, if we have changed, right? And so let's kind of talk about the first one. So, the first one, as I said, the complex buyer journey and the sales landscape has changed the breed of salesperson. We're going to have to sell differently moving forward. Now, we already just talked about why the cost of money. We talked about that. We talked about remote, so those are all things. But if you look at the complexity of the buyer network for a second, I mean, it's insane, right? It's insane. Now, we can argue, hey, is this a good representation of all the buyers that are involved in who you sell to? And you can talk about whether it's Forrester or Gartner or Salesforce or HubSpot. They'll say it's okay, it's 6 to 8, 8 to 10, 10 to 14. I think Gartner's up to 19 different groups within a buying party. I don't know the number. I think it's different by company. But I think directionally, they're correct, which means there's way more people involved, right? There's way more people involved for all the reasons that I said, that conservative, right? That enterprise-wide decision. And they come and go. They come and go based on stages, right? So when we're doing all that solution exploration, we're building all those requirements, people are coming and going on the buying side with functional expertise, which is also a little twist that we have to watch about for sales. But the bottom line is, it's team buying, right? Team buying. I've been teaching team buying on the enterprise side when they have big ticket items for years, but it's affecting everybody. And early on, when I was teaching team buying, people would roll their eyes, I get it, but I really want to do my own thing. But the world has changed. So when you're team buying, we absolutely have to make sure that we're coordinated when we're doing team selling, right? Because otherwise, we're going to get killed. Because if you really think about, just historically, I would sell one-on-one, maybe one-on-two, and it was to this group here, right? Forget the rest of the company. And it was your job to go figure out and do all the politics internally, and I would do the same on my side, right? So you and I would be in alignment. You go figure out your side, I'll figure out my side, and then we'll move forward. Well, that's not actually true any longer. So, whether the ratio is one-on-one, one-on-two, it doesn't really matter. But if you think about now, when I'm having more buyers on the other side, again, whether it's 12 or 14 or 9, when I have more functional buyers on the other side with that expertise, they know an awful lot about a very narrow subject. So if I'm talking about, with an engineer on the opposite side with 30 years experience, they know a lot about what they do. And I know a little about a lot as a salesperson, don't we? We know a little about a lot of stuff when it comes to how does it affect all those different buyers within an organization. I don't have a PhD in all that stuff, but they certainly have a PhD in engineering. And so it's unrealistic for me to believe, as an individual salesperson, that I can actually pull that off. But I do. Why do we resist, as sellers, to involve others? So I'm always amazed that I've got multiple people on the buying side, and I have an individual salesperson thinking that they can do this Herculean task of going in and having that expertise with each and every one of them. So why do they go alone? Why do sellers continue to go alone? Well, I think it's a couple different things. One is they don't trust the other side, right? They don't trust the people that they're selling with. Because here's what sellers think about, not you, but others. They say, I have spent 8 months to get this deal right here. If I bring in my sales engineer, they're going to spend about 8 minutes, and they're going to blow up this deal because I can't control what they say. And so they use one instance that happened in 1929 that is their basis of, that's why I don't want to bring anybody else in. So it's probably a trust factor. It's probably also maybe because salespeople, we kind of over-exaggerate our skill level, right? Hey, I know more about my product than you do, so I'll just kind of move my way through this thing. Okay, that's great. And salespeople, we know, hey, listen, sales is a sick profession, right? I mean, we lose more than we win. I mean, let's face it. I mean, honestly, what other profession do you go into You know, and somebody says, hey, listen, before you go into it, you're going to lose about 80% of the time. You're going to get your head kicked in, lied to, and all those other things. And so it's a little difficult. So yes, of course, we have this impenetrable ego, like, yeah, I'm pretty good at what I do. And when we lose, it's of course your fault. It's not our fault. You know, I did my job, right? So I got that. But sometimes, you know, we still do it because maybe there's time constraints where the buyers need something really, really quick. Buyers have this unique ability to do wait, hurry. Isn't that true? It's the wait, hurry move, right? And then they expect you to jump through hoops in the last millisecond, and you're like, well, I need a team, I don't know how to do it, I'll just do it. But most of all, I think it's just resistance of change. I've done it this way, I'm going to continue to do it this way. I win 15% of the time, pretty comfortable with that. And if I go down, I'm going down on my own. But let's talk about if we do add more, which we are going to, we have to survive, we're going to have to do some things differently. One of them is we have to map our selling team against that buying team, right? We're going to have to map who they are. We're going to have to map things like, what are the roles? So if I have an EVP, I should have somebody that's got some stature, right, to map up against that EVP versus somebody that's onboarding our company. I want about expertise. I've got a 30-year engineer on the other side. It would be nice if I had somebody that had some stature internally as well. Maybe somebody that just didn't come out of college seems like a bit of a disconnect, right? But I often find that you don't really think about mapping expertise, role, experience level. What typically happens in some companies is who's available, who's not productive. In the consulting world, they say, who's on the beach? And we'll put the people on the beach on the selling team. That means if they're not doing anything, let's throw them into the team, versus mapping properly what we're talking about. How about even disc styles, behavioral styles, right? So if I'm a huge disc fan, so if I have a high D buyer, I certainly probably don't want to put him with a high I, right? The high D buyer wants to cut to the chase. Hey, this is my question, blah, 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 and here comes the I. Say, how was your weekend? You know, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to shoot myself, right? So 45 minutes of getting ready to get into the call, and then they jump into the call. I left that call mentally about 38 minutes ago, right? And so also, but the flip side is, if I'm a high D seller and I have an S buyer, I'm going to bully my way through. That's not going to be very good, right? And I think sellers, we get paid to change the way we sell. Buyers do not get paid to change the way they buy, right? That's just not how it works. So I think the first question that we'd ask is, do you actually map your sellers against your buyers? I mean, have you really done that? Or is it who's on our team is good at what they do? Which is okay, I get it, but I think we should also figure out who on our team is good at what they do and matches to the other side. That's the point. That's the point. But above and beyond that, when you have done it properly, when you've mapped properly that buyer and seller, confidence goes up. Confidence goes up. Because the buyer is saying to themselves at some level, they understand my problem. They can solve my problem, right? Versus they don't really get it. Because the way you sell, people perceive, that's how that relationship is going to continue. If it starts poorly, it's going to end poorly. People buy from us, as an example, because they say, I love the way you sold us. And so think about that. That's true for you too. But think about also, if I've mapped properly, the level of conversations that can happen between that buyer and seller is awesome. Because they have second, third level discussions that I would never be able to do as a salesperson because I know a little about a lot. I mean, I've watched people in our team talk about assessments, I don't even know what they're saying. I have no idea what they're saying. And they try to jockey to see who knows more, so they throw in more technical stuff out there, and I'm nodding like I know what I'm saying. Yes, you know, but it's hard, right? So it really builds that credibility. A couple other things. When we do map that team selling, it's got to be super collaborative. It's got to be super collaborative. Everybody's busy, right? I think remote has actually made us have, let me just speak for myself. I have more back-to-back meetings than I've ever had in my life because of remote. I feel guilty to say, I need to go to the restroom. I need to go to the bathroom. Can you just give me 2 minutes? Right? Because they just book me back. And that's true with a lot of people. And so, but we have to make sure we have time to be super collaborative. If you really think about it, I always look at it, team buying, team selling. I always say this, okay, well, they buy in packs, right? So we have to sell in packs. Well, if you use that analogy for a second, have you ever watched pack animals hunt? I mean, they know exactly what they're doing. They know when they're entering. They have people waiting down the thing. You ever watch lions? I mean, they have it down pat. And so do sports. So do sports teams, right? If you ever watched like NFL, you can see players on the field arguing because you can see the quarterback like, you should have gone this way. You know, what happened? You didn't follow the play. Everybody expects everybody to be in a certain location. NFL, they don't sit in a huddle and say, okay, guys, listen, this is a big play. It's a big play. You make a lot of money, right? Got a good experience. On the count of 3, do what you think is best. Does that happen? No. But does it happen in sales? Yeah. I mean, it's insane, right? And so you kind of understand the salesperson saying, I don't want that to happen, right? We have to be coordinated. So things like, you know, we have to make sure that we're aligned on when we're exiting, when we're entering. We have to be aligned on making sure that, hey, what questions, who's asking what questions, what information do we need, what messages are we sending? I mean, do you really tell people on your sales team, on your team, these are the 3 questions I want you to get from your person? And hopefully, you have added a couple that you're not getting from your professional buyer, because your professional buyer is not an open book. But what you'll find is, when you've got others on the buying team, they tend to kind of be open, right? The engineer will tell you anything you want. They'll tell you anything you want. So for me, I say, hey, make sure that you ask those 2 or 3 questions to that person. And here's the messages that we want to send. Because I want them to hear what you said, because that's what they're going to repeat to others in the buying team. So you have to control the message. But we kind of don't think that way. But you really have to be like laser guided in what you're going to control. It's super important. So be collaborative, over-communicate. You should have meetings all the time talking about who knows what. What did you learn? And you'd also be shocked. They say, well, we have a CRM for that. Well, okay, I get that part. Yeah? What's my login for that again? Right? So, come on. So it's important for us to do that. Now we also have, what I'm going to say, you have to make sure that you're super coordinated. Salespeople, you have to be air traffic controllers, right? When I hear a salesperson say, well, I don't know what happened on that call, that's code for you didn't take control. You are air traffic controller. This is your deal. When it goes awry, sales leaders are going to look at who? The buying team? Probably, but they're going to say, hey, and if you didn't get it, it's your quota. So we have to make sure that you are air traffic controller. We're dealing with roles and responsibilities, right? We're dealing with when you're exiting and entering. We're dealing with what are the handoffs, all that type of stuff. Now, I'll give you, but even internal coordination. I have 5 kids. I said this to you before. Some are in sales. They're unqualified to do anything else. So they're in sales, right? And 2 of them started as BDRs. And so my son is a BDR, now is an AE. And here's an example of how it wasn't passed on. He would actually have all the notes in the CRM. AE wouldn't even look at it. They would jump on the call and say the exact same thing that they said before. And the client was upset. The prospect was upset. And so they just kept losing digs. Now, he said, I'm going to take control of that. So he jumps on the call with the AE on the first call with the buyer and says, Mary, hey, I don't want to introduce Steve. Steve will be taking it from here. We still have 45 minutes? Yep. That's great, Mary. Hey, Mary, on the call, I know that you explained to me here are the 3 or 4 issues that you're experiencing. Is that anything you want to add since our last call? Nope. Steve also had a couple questions that he would like to ask you today to start off, but I think he wanted to make sure that he better understood the issues. So if you don't mind, if he could start off by a couple questions, then he can dig deep, and then also do what you wanted, which is you wanted to see X, Y, and Z. Is that okay? Yep. All right, listen, appreciate the opportunity to do business. I'll hand it off to Steve, and look forward to talking to you in the future. That's it. Guess what? Closing ratios went through the roof. Each one of my kids, the handoffs between each group within the sales team is horrific. Not you guys, but I'm saying it's out there. We have to be coordinated. And when you leverage your team members, lots of stuff happens. Builds credibility, more so than you could by yourself. 2, we get tons of information. When I'm stonewall from my professional buyer, I'm having my buying team ask those questions because they're gonna get it from all the other people who have not been trained to say nothing. And also, I get to figure out who the internal politics stuff is, like all those internal dynamics. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, when it boils down to this particular group's gonna ultimately make the decision, so whatever they say is it. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that. So it's helpful. It's helpful. You have to leverage it though, because team buying is not stopping. It's not stopping, and they are smarter than we are. So we have to figure that out. Now, a couple other things. Technology has also allowed buyers to jump in later in the process. And so we've got to figure out, hey, they've jumped in late, and I've done it too. Like I do that too, and I love salespeople. But I don't have time, so I get them in late. So, but when people are entering into the sales process later, right, they're getting you in later, you've got to figure out where they are. You've got to figure out where they are in that buyer journey. Because if you're in engagement, that's a much different experience than if you're in decision, right? So you got to feel like, where are they? And then when they tell you where they are, you have to trust but verify. Because everyone's got a PhD in Google. So when they bring you in so late, they actually may think that they understand the problem and they are looking for a particular solution. But remember what Sandler said, the problem that the buyer gives you is never the real issue, right? That's what we said. So we've got to make sure that we trust but verify. So simple. Now, listen, when people call, I always do these things. I say, hey, listen, hey, thanks for calling. I find there's like 2 different groups that reach out to us. One has absolutely identified the issue. They've understood the impact throughout the organization. They validated that internally, and they're just looking for the right partner. Other organizations that I talk to understand that there's an issue, not really sure, and they're looking for expertise like us to help better understand what that issue is, so they then can figure out who the best partner is. Where are you? Now, even if they say to me, okay, Dave, I'm in the first group, which everyone says, of course we know the problem, well, you still have to then make sure, that's awesome, can I ask a couple questions so I can get caught up, and then I can give you maybe some better expertise on my end to make sure that I solve that problem. But you have to trust and verify where you are. I think when they also bring you in late, they bring you in a single pane, wherever they are. So you have to figure, if they tell you they've got problem A, let's just say closing, right? I've got closing. Well, I can expand that conversation. I can start talking about different products and services that I may have that maybe isn't relevant to this conversation of closing. But every ounce of my body says, closing, I can do that. But if I go, what causes that? Sure, poor deal review. That's a separate conversation. They probably aren't even qualifying. They probably don't even understand pain and the impact of pain. Well, what's the effect? Well, probably they're discounting the heck to close deals, right? Their resources aren't even available when they should have them because you thought it was closing 2 months ago. Management said, I've got to put those consultants out billing. So when you actually close it, it's done. So there's a lot of things going on. So when somebody calls you and says, I have problem A, really make sure that you're going left and right to have those expansion conversations. It's there. You have to do it. Now, if we talk a little about our second imperative, and I would ask yourselves, do I do anything that I just talked about, those topics? You do some of it a little time. I'm asking you to do it all the time. When it comes to technology, we do have to work hand in hand. You know, I always think historically it's always been this push-pull between marketing and sales. It's always just been those two, marketing and sales, right? You know, hey, your leads are garbage. You don't call them in any way, says marketing. Collateral stinks. Well, what do you need? I don't know, but what you give us is terrible. So there's always this thing. But technology has actually gone from this with marketing and sales to this, because it's hand in glove. Technology has actually made that relationship, it should, stronger than ever. And so now I've got technology, marketing, and sales. Hey, maybe hold on, that's a Sandler triangle. There's another triangle coming, right? So it's there. But where does technology fit into some of these imperatives that we're talking about? Well, in the buyer journey we've already talked about. They get to come in later, right? It's certainly virtual selling and all that's more complexity than ever. We know that. We also have talked about, hey, when it comes to the buyer journey, we really have to make sure that we understand the pain points of all the different contingencies. And we've asked, is this one or two things that you actually want to solve this quarter? That's always a question I love to ask to make sure that I've understood the importance of that. And when it comes to sales and technology, which we'll get into, hey, let's talk about pre-funnel stuff, right? Technology's changed everything. I've got chatbots. I've got AI identifying who I should call on. I don't have to think about that anymore. I've got auto dialers, which has taken away call reluctance. They're still super effective out there. I've got laser-guided messaging. I have now dashboards on my computer that tells me what behavioral style they are, when I'm losing engagement, what do I have to say next, what letters I have to write. It's insane. In the funnel itself, technology's changed everything. Of course, I've already taught you about the pain steps, but I also have now voice intelligence all over, which tells me everything I want to know and more, quite frankly, right? It tells me also in the funnel, I've got things like Deal IQ, which then says, okay, here's AI built into the sales funnel. Built into the sales funnel. How cool is that? This is exactly where you are, and these are the questions that you need to uncover in order to increase the probability of close from 40% where you are to 80%. That's laser-guided stuff. I would never have understood that. But it tells me now, AI tells me everything. It tells me exactly what to do. And on the leadership side, AI, listen, hey, generative AI has now connected so many dots for leaders that I never had in the past. And so it's super important because now I have to go from asking the what questions, like what's going on, to now I'm asking why questions. The value of a sales leader, senior sales leader, was always gathering in dashboards and then they're like the air traffic controller of dashboards. That's gone. AI is going to end up doing that. So we have to stop focusing on the what and get to the why. Really, they're going to be focused on coaching and training more than ever because AI has already done that time-consuming analytic stuff. It really has. And so as sales leaders, we're going to have to embrace that technology. We're going to have to sponsor it, right? We're going to have to make sure that we're leading it. Even internally, we had a communication platform. No one wanted to leave it. We left it. And they're like, hey, I don't want to. And we had legacy. So senior leaders just had to use the new platform. And when that's the only way you were going to communicate with us. And then the rest of the company came along. But oftentimes, sometimes, we as management are the last to adopt because that's for that group. But it can't happen that way. Because if we're not leading the charge, then we're going to have poor adoption, which is a complete waste of time and energy. But we're going to have a strategy at the end of the day, right? We talked about tech stacks. There's so much overlapping technology that we have in our organizations. We got rid of mid-six figures of waste in our company because the SaaS platforms are doing, the amount of overlap is just amazing, right? And so people are always saying, look, how do I leverage that? Well, I've already said you absolutely have to pick your horse, whatever it is. And it's even harder for companies that do M&A because you're inheriting tech stacks, right? We're inheriting those tech stacks. And so we have to leverage it. You're going to have to make sure that I said that technology and methodology is embedded. Just think about just a simple example. If I'm making some sort of prospecting outbound, I could send an email. That's about this effective. I could put video on top, send a video message. It's more effective, for sure. Or then I could put methodology, what to say, how to say it on top of that. If I put the video with methodology, awesome. So I've gone from here, just a simple email, to here when I combine technology and methodology. And that's true in every example. I'm just using an outbound prospecting call, but you know it's true everywhere. I send so many videos now, I don't even email. They can see my tonality, and I get to put the Sandler stuff into it. Much better, much better. But you know, CRM is becoming the center of the universe, right? And so we do have to make sure that it is in the flow of work, and it is where you work. So I did a whole 2 hours on the virtual summit on technology and sales. So I know that was high level on the tech stuff, but we already spent, the virtual summit, we had like 7,000 people on the virtual summit. If you haven't participated or you didn't participate, you should just take a look at that, because it was all designed to cover how does tech and sales work in conjunction with each other. And you can get that. But I want to spend some time also on how technology has changed the way that we manage. Because strong management, right? If you've invested in strong sales leadership, it's going to make a difference. Think about all the things that I've already said with, hey, the buyer journey is changing. Technology, the sales landscape is changing, right? The way that we manage has to change. In sales management, so hard. They have a difficult job. You know, they are managing people with different personality types. They're managing people with different experience levels, right? And different skill sets. Can you imagine, if you were all on my team and you all had different skill sets and experiences, how difficult that is for me to coach? Which is why, you know, the individual learning path is becoming more important, but it's really hard. It's really hard, and we have no training. Here's how it normally works. Not in your companies, but in others. Stanley, our sales manager, left. And here's what we do as senior leaders. Wow, what are we gonna do with, how are we gonna fix that? Hey, let's look at our top leaders. Look at our top producers, right? So we call our top producers. Hey, Mary, hey, listen, Stanley left, as you know. We've had our eye on you for a long time. We really have. And we think this is a good opportunity for you in your career path to live up to what we believe your potential is. We'd like you to manage our team. Best case is you have 25 mini Marys. That would be awesome. We'd love to have you. Are you willing to have a conversation? What? Oh, no interest? Okay, of course we still support you, Mary. We love you, of course. Hey, Steve. Hey. We're going to keep going until somebody says yes, right? Because if I don't feel that, that means I've got to do it as a senior leader, and that's not happening, right? So we need the numbers, so we're going to keep going. So it's really hard as sales leaders. Now, we're going to look at two brief examples of some of the challenges that we have as sales leaders for a second, and how tech has changed it. One is onboarding and offboarding, and the other one, it would be deal coaching, right? Deal coaching. So let's talk about sales onboarding and offboarding. First of all, do you manage or do you track as an organization the time to hire to the time of first sale? Do you track that? You should track that, because if you think about momentum and confidence and conviction, I will do anything possible to get that person the first sale. Because once they get that first sale, yep, right? Sales is a head game. You know, I play golf poorly. You know what I say on the first hole every single time? Just hit the ball. Just hit the ball. Please, pass the woman's tees. Just hit the ball. Right? Sometimes it works. Most times it doesn't. But it's a very interesting time, because the employee, the salesperson, they want to succeed. They just want to know, what's the path of success? We as an organization want you to succeed, right? We hired the right person. We want to make sure that, hey, our quota is going to get hit. All that stuff is there. There's a weird time. And there's a lot of people involved in most onboarding. And they aren't properly pre-briefed either. But that's a whole different discussion. So here's the thing. When we're onboarding in today's world, listen, I would say just focus on the first 120 days. Now, you can say, well, 120 days, I'm on a 9-month sales cycle. That's okay, just adjust the time frame. But the onboarding programs that I've seen are like yay thick. They're humongous. They teach you everything there is to know about your company. Listen, I'm remote. I don't get to talk to people at the water cooler, right? So only give me what I need to do to succeed in that opening time frame. I'll learn the rest. You may have 23 products. That's great. None of your team are selling those 23 products. They're probably only selling 1 or 2 in the beginning. I'm not saying they're not, but then just teach me that. And then I'll learn the other products and services so I can go deep and wide into my organizations and create stickiness. So just give me what I need to know. And so here's the steps with even remote, right? Remote. 1, just tell me what I need to do to get that first sale, right? And so let's assume it meets 120 days, then put it in priority. So for instance, if there's something that I don't really need to know until after my first sale, don't give it to me. But if you say, hey, in the first 2 weeks, let's just pick some things we all know as Sandler people. Hey, in the first 2 weeks, you should be able to tell us your 30-second commercial. You should be able to do a good upfront contract, as an example. That's awesome. So let's just do that let's use that as our example. So now I have a priority of all the things that I'm supposed to know now in my first sale. I'll get to all of the other stuff later. Here's the next thing. I love the show you, show me model. Adults learn by imitation and illustration. And so if I use the 30-second commercial as an example, you should give them the 30-second commercial that you think is magical. I've seen so many onboarding programs. Create your 30-second commercial. Are you insane? They don't even know what you're doing. Give them something to mimic. So if it's not you, how about somebody on your team? Just go right on Zoom and do a 30-second commercial, give it to them. Now you have audio and you have written. And you say to them, now you're gonna test it, you say to them, hey, listen, here's a great 30-second commercial. Next Friday, I want you to give me that 30-second commercial. What do you think they're doing for the next week? They are practicing. Check the box, that's awesome. Their ears have to hear what their mouth is saying. And so they're building confidence because you're teaching them what it takes to succeed, right? So good onboarding in today's environment builds confidence. It builds confidence. It builds sales culture because you're teaching me only what I need to know to succeed. I love that. But it's also giving me accountability because it's saying to me, okay, this is what it takes to succeed. Here's your 30-second commercial. This is the model. I want you to mimic this one versus creating your own, and I want to hear it next week. Managers are always struggling with the culture of accountability. But if I then tell you that and you don't do it time in and time again, okay, guess what? It's time to offboard, right? So if they're not living up to what you expect success to be, that's a problem. Deal coaching, super important. I think deal coaching right now is problematic. Why? Because you've got fantasy. Salespeople are coming and telling me what the issue is. I'm doing the best I can, but I don't know where the problem is. I don't know really where you are, but AI has now helped me do a couple things. AI has helped me do exactly what I need to know and what do I have to do. Poor deal coaching and funnel hygiene are connected. Sales leaders are not awesome at deal coaching. They're probably very good tacticians, but we're dealing normally with the wrong problem because the salespeople haven't accurately told me where I am. Now, AI will fix that, but deal hygiene is probably the number one pain point for most managers. We've all had deals that we thought were gonna close now, but they didn't close this month, and now something came up, not next month either. Sometimes deals are on our funnel for so long, they should be arrested for squatting, right? If you really look behind that deal, they've got electricity and running water. That's how long they've been there, with no clear future. And so AI now says to us, we can use AI, and it says to you, here's exactly where you are. Here's exactly where you are, and you only have about a 40% probability of close. It tells you that. Because if you think about what goes on now, it's 2 levels of fantasy. You ask for, hey, what are we gonna close this month as a sales leader? The salespeople give you a number, fantasy number 1. Fantasy number 1. And so let's say you had 10 people, let's just do quick math, $10 million. And so then you look at it and you say, well, Stanley hasn't even been here for 2 months. He's not going to close $1 million. So I'm going to knock him to zero. Mary, she's typically about 70% correct on target. I'm going to move her to 700,000. And I do that for my whole team. They told me 10. I tell my team 6.5. And they may even lower it, so I'm a hero when it comes in at 8. But I have 2 levels of fantasy. But again, data and analytics have changed everything. Now I actually know, and so does senior leadership, so I can better plan, is that I've got this much coming in. And I only have a 40% probability of close. It tells us everything. And that's the magic. Because when you actually get data behind you and you can make data decisions, the probability, it's just amazing what happens. It's amazing what happens. So as you go through the next 2 days, here are some questions that I want you to think about. What are you going to adjust? I'd like you to take some notes over the 2 days, like what are you adjusting in 2024? Knowing full well all the complexity that we've talked about. Like, do you really map properly against the buying team, with your sales team? Have you really embraced tech? Are we really onboarding the way we should be doing? Or are we just throwing, everything at them at once? There's a million questions that we have to go through. And so when I see you tomorrow, I'm going to ask you 6 questions that I'd like you to think about as we close. But this is the year of adjustment. Technology, in mind, has accelerated since 2020. It's not slowing down, and it's not going to slow down. And we as sellers and leaders have to embrace it and catch up. And I think those are the 3 big imperatives that we've seen as far as trends. There's a lot underneath it. I know we're struggling with bits and pieces of those points all the way through, but I think that's the challenge that we have. Sales has gotten very complex. Sales art or science? And it's leaning towards the science. And so that's really my challenge for you over the next 2 days, is make a list of things that you're going to adjust based on all the speakers. Thematically, we're heading in the same direction, and that's the challenge. So again, I appreciate you being here. I know it's time and resources. Awesome. I've met a ton of you, but I hope I get an opportunity to meet the rest of you. Have a great 2 days.